Hello and welcome to Revision Tips for SIPS Level 5, Advanced Diploma in Procurement and Supply. This is Module 1, Managing Teams and Individuals, and I'm going to look at Learning Outcome 1, which is to understand, analyse and apply management and organisational approaches. So we look at aspects of organisational behaviour, we look at the contemporary approaches to management, and we analyse the origins of management and organisational behaviour as well as the influences that shape it. So someone once said that the team organisational behaviour is a little misleading, or the term, should I say, is misleading because it actually refers to the behaviour of people. Now, using different perspectives from different subject areas, we can help managers to understand what influences the behaviour of people within their organisations. And this behaviour provides managers with a broad view of things that influence people's behaviour, including the four things on the screen. So you've got the individual. They are important whether they act alone or as a group, and their behaviour is a result of their own understanding of management expectations. We've then got the group, which is formed of individuals within that group. They can form because of the human social need. It could be for task requirements or due to organisational structures. And equally, groups can be formal or informal. You've then got the organisation, and the org design choices affect how the structure of the organisation enhances or inhibits contact between the individuals and the groups. Formal organisations can, for example, be hierarchical. And then finally, the environment. They don't operate in a vacuum. They take inputs and produce outputs to the external arena environment. And so these environmental forces, such as the political climate or the health of the economy, again, they can have an impact. So a manager is responsible for work that is accomplished through the performance contributed by others. So a manager is concerned with making things happen and keeping work on schedule, engaging in routine interactions to fulfill those planned actions. But what do you think a manager's role is? Consider the interactions you have with your manager and the interactions they may have with others in your department. So essentially their role is just to coordinate, support the individuals in a team and make sure that everything's aligned to the strategic goals and that you're hitting that required performance level. But Mullins' process of management model states that managers are responsible for processes and work tasks, coordinating people, motivation, job satisfaction and reward, coherence of activities aligned with the organisation's activities, and developing people. So a manager needs to consider a number of things in relation to individuals and groups. So with individuals, what are their goals and do they understand what their role is? What's the impact of that group pressure on the individuals? Because group pressure can drive individuals' motivation and performance, or it could lead to some form of dysfunction. And then the impact in terms of its structure, again, this can enhance or inhibit the interaction of groups or individuals across the organisation. And then those changes from the environment I mentioned on the last slide. So it could be increased demands on the organisation, which can place individuals under pressure and cause groups to adapt. So why is it important for a manager to consider both the individual and the group? Have a think about that. I think it's also worth thinking, just so you can get your head around this, to understand what are your goals, what in terms of an organisation and also from a personal career point of view, what motivates you? And then think about your team. How do you work with them? How do you influence them? And can you think of a specific example where your team has enhanced or inhibited your performance? And does your manager support you at work? Now, Nadler and Tushman developed a matrix to examine the operation of an organisation and the relationship between the people and the organisation in the context of the environment in which it operates. So they identified four forces: the task that needs to be completed, the formal systems that exist in the organisation, the culture of the organisation, and how the capabilities of the people within the organisation are actually used. So just think about a department you work in. Describe to yourself or list it down what the culture is within your team by considering all of those aspects. Now, management takes place within the organisational context. So you've got the internal organisational system, which is a socially constructed system that develops from the interactions between the structure of the people who work with that structure. You've got the external environment, the operating environment, and this impacts on the behaviour of the people. So the manager's not able to control this part. And then the systems are interconnected. So organisations influence the environment and the environment influences the operation of an organisation. So it's basically like the demands and the response to what's going on between the internal and the external environment. But other factors you need to include are things like the physical workspace, you've got communication systems and patterns, informal and formal networks, the culture and leadership styles, the internal processes, the power and the politics. So consider your workplace again. Draw a mind map or write some post-it notes down. As many elements as you can think of that think about things like the physical workplace, communication systems and patterns, whether you've got informal or formal networks, what the culture's like, and the leadership style, as well as the internal processes, the power and the politics. And then ask yourself, what does this all mean? And how has it impacted your work? And just think if there's been any significant changes and what impact that might have had on you, to take another look at all the aspects that you've listed and then just reconsider it. See if any need to be amended, added or taken away. Now, Morgan argued that organisations and management theory could be explained using 8 metaphors. You've got the machine. The aim is to manage the system efficiently. Think about the way organisations are often described using words like systems, processes, inputs and outputs. You've got the organism. This has a more organic approach. It presents the organisation as an open system and described along biological lines with symptoms, diagnosis, lifebloods and flows. The brain. The language focuses on the ability for an organisation to learn, to understand and adapt to change occurring in the environment. The cultural system. This metaphor emphasises how symbolism and informal elements of the organisation contribute to creation of shared meaning between organisational actors. The focus on providing the organisation with an identity. The political system. This metaphor seeks to explain how the diversity of interests, power, conflict and politics affect and shape the organisation. And it aims to identify and explain how an organisation is governed and what parties have the power. The psychic prison. This examines the unconscious, the psyche, and how members become trapped by an organisation. So the language used here includes the ideas of individuals being repressed, controlled, imprisoned by the forces within their organisation. You've then got the instrument of domination, which focuses on exploitation, control, and how power is distributed in the organisation. So the language and words used here are coercion, threat, and force. And then the flux and transformation, drawing on autopoiesis, the system which is able to reproduce and maintain itself. The chaos and complexity theories. The language focuses on self-organisation, self-renew, and the ebb and flow of an organisation's environment. Now, the relationship between an employee and an employer cannot be captured completely in legal language used in an employment contract. So alongside the written contract, there is a psychological contract, which is often more powerful than the written one. And there can be significant issues when it's broken. And this is because the expectations are subjective and based on an individual's inferred belief about their duties. Now, the basis of a psychological contract is how the manager and employee understand their relationships themselves. And this understanding can result from what the employee or manager has experienced in a previous relationship, things said during the recruitment process, such as promised career progression or pay increases, discussions during one-to-one meetings or appraisals, or decisions made or practices used in other teams by other managers, such as agreements about overtime or holiday requests, as well as public statements made by the organisation about the treatment of their employees. So it's essential that managers understand the internal and external organisational context. This will allow them to develop an appropriate response to the environmental elements that affect the operation of an organisation and the behaviour of the individuals that are employed by them. Now, the external environment is made up of two distinct elements. You've got the general environment and you've got the task environment. Now, in the general environment, we can use the steepled framework to analyse these factors. So socially, we can talk about, our staffing levels, technology, that might be attitudes towards technology, the economy, it could be booming or we could be entering into a recession, and so on and so forth. And then the task environment, again, is linked to steepled because it relates directly to business and it affects their ability to achieve their strategic goals. The socio-technical theory was first proposed in 1951 by Trish and Bamford. It states the organisation needs both effective technology and coordinating social dynamics in order to be successful. It also states that the people who work within the technology processes and procedures, which determine whether the benefits of those processes will be fully realised. So it's important that the people are given equal consideration. It's particularly important for organisational change because often human factors are ignored as the process is on the business processes. And it doesn't view technology as a key factor in driving positive work behaviours, but recognises it has an impact on how sustainable, positive social dynamics will be. So the model of organisational balance by Foster said that this is a people-led approach, moving from the social technological approach, and it focuses on the interrelationships between human interactions within the organisation and the purpose that it is the human systems that determines the organisational performance. The model aims to increase organisation performance and self-development to a self-sustaining system by considering things that are in this interrelationship. So the purpose of the organisation, why does it exist? The leader to me, there are two types of leaders. You've got the leader of the people and the leader of expertise. You've then got the talent, identifying and investing resources to developing and releasing talent. Harmonising communities using a network of cohesive groups to manage business-related tasks. Organisational habitat, developing synergy within the organisation to help the org to react to and exploit opportunities as they occur. You've got the organisational husbandry. This is a holistic framework in which solutions and operational decisions are made with awareness of unintended consequences and a commitment to environmental stewardship and citizenship. Creative adaptation, empowering people to innovate and make space for creative problem solving. Energy transformation, the development of sustainable practices to ensure that an organisation's interventions deliver positive distribution and hold organisational actors accountable for their actions. And then organisational cycling, the continuous process of change and transformation within the organised system in response to environmental inputs that move the organisation towards the balance prior to the arrival of the next distributive force. Now, system theories develop the idea that an organisation must respond to demands from the external context, adapting and improving its response. And in turn, it suggests that the organisational system itself will have an influence on the external environment in which it operates. Now, Foster identified a number of activities that a manager can carry out in order to apply the system in their practice. And these include gaining access to different views of what's happening in an organisation. And you do that through cross-functional groups, and understanding that no one person has all the data and communication lines open, and managers can gain a rich understanding of what's happening in the organisation. Adopting a holistic approach and reviewing action from a whole organisation perspective rather than just focusing on smaller parts that need fixing. And investigating connections that will help the line of reports to gain an understanding of employee systems, subsystem and processes, as well as interdependencies before developing an action plan to move forward. Encouraging collaboration between different teams within the organisation, and exposing individual team members and the team as a whole to forces in the external environment using networking and field trips. Instead of being best practice, the contingency approach suggests that a fix for all improved organisational health is based on best fit within the context. Now, Woodward states the right amount of approach to decisions about org structures may be based on choices about the right technology and management control variables. So, for example, an organisation that's enriched will be highly structured and focused on safety and governance procedures, but on contrast, an entrepreneurial startup that is seeking to distribute, I don't know, a travel bag market is likely to be flexible, much more flexible in terms of its organisational structure. Now, in the late 20th century, a postmodern philosophical movement was established, and it highlighted that there's no object neutral reality. There is no such thing as truth. Scientific and technical knowledge leads to destruction and oppression. Reason and logic are simply abstract concepts, and human nature is socially determined. Language is not static, and so meaning can change over time, or depending on who is involved in its discourse. Theories that are used to explain the world force conformity and disregard other perspectives. So according to postmodernism, the organisation itself only exists in the minds and conversations of people. When anyone talks about organisations, they're described as social agreements. They're a collection of office buildings as an entity. So when the individual says that something can't be done, it's because they're choosing to believe that. But that's not the truth. It's not objective neutrally. It's just a perceived truth. So this postmodernism in organisation is a rejection of systematic rationality in determining an objective truth or human history and social norms. And that explains the construction of subjective perspectives through the study of language and discourse. Now, classical approaches to organisational behaviour attempts to provide clarity about the purpose of the organisation and how it operates, to recommend methods to improve the way work is achieved and performance outcomes. So it reflects the political, social and economic upheaval that were occurring at the time. It recognises drive for efficiency, but doesn't reflect the complexities of present-day operations. It's a foundational approach that subsequent theories are developed from. Considers how the organisation is structured in terms of hierarchy, formal relationships and reporting lines to explain how work tasks are allocated and coordinated. And they often face criticism because they focus on the notion of management planning and ignore the factors that contribute to the organisational work environment. Now, Fayol's 14 Principles of Management is an example of a classical approach. It's also translated into English in 1949 because it wasn't necessarily written in that language to begin with. But the principles are authority and responsibility. Managers have the authority and responsibility to give orders to their employees. Discipline. Employees should be respective and demonstrate discipline and obedience towards their managers. The unit of command is where employees are to take orders from one manager to avoid confusion. Unity of direction, each manager must own the action plan of their team. Subordination of individual interests is where organisations' directives and objectives take primacy over the individual interests. Remuneration, employee must be rewarded sufficiently so that employees are motivated and productive. The degree of centralisation, senior managers must coordinate their decision making and decentralise it to the lowest point sensible within the organisation. The scalar chain, clear lines of authority must be established and contingency plans must be in place to preserve the integrity of the hierarchy in the event of an emergency. Order, so work environments need to be safe, clean and tidy to enable you to be orderly and function optimally. Equity, treat employees fairly, equally and kindly. Stability of tenure of personnel, and this is to ensure the right skills are available at the right time. So managers need to ensure that employee turnover is minimalised. Initiative, employees should be encouraged to show initiative and add creative value to an organisation. And esprit de corps is where employees' involvement should be supported to ensure that team morale is high. Now, other examples of this classical approach include Taylor's Principles of Scientific Management, Weber's bureaucratic approach, and Mayo's Hawthorne effect, which led to the establishment of the human relations movement. In each approach, the theorist attempts to provide clarity about the purpose of an organisation, how it operates, and recommends methods to improve the way they work to achieve performance outcomes. Now, scientific management considers all of the resources, including people as machines, and it identified component tasks within a work process. So it's used in scientific study to identify a solution that allows the task to be completed most effectively. The machine, or the best machine to complete the task, the best working method to complete the job, and the best way to organise it. So Taylor was a founding father of scientific management, and that shaped the rational economic approach to motivating individuals to perform in organisational settings, which fitted with the progression of industrialisation and focused on transposing process management and improvement to increase productivity and ultimately output levels. The key principles is underlying the scientific management approach include developing efficient work structures as a scientific endeavour, recruitment, selection, training and development of workers in a scientific process. Work must be carried out in a prescribed way, and the focus is on quality of output and eliminating inefficiency. Increasing wages for improved levels of output, and efficient work methods require precise coordination and control of work. Work and responsibility is divided between management and workers, and workers should be motivated to work efficiently and productively in return for the opportunity to attain a higher wage. So this had a significant sustainable impact on the output of workers, but there was a concern about the reliance on the reward motivation equation and the emphasis of management control, which left workers feeling disempowered. So factors such as motivation, engagement and team dynamics were unknown at the time that Taylor was theorising. And Taylor's physiological perspective aligned with Theory X approach to management, which suggests that workers are lazy and attempts to fool management. And many modern day practices such as performance-related pay and systematic planning, waste elimination and management by expectations have their roots in management thinking around this Taylorism. Now, current management tools and techniques that focus on the process of production rather than human interface include the kind of business process re-engineering, total quality management, lean manufacturing, and Six Sigma. Now, bureaucracy is a rational design system of control run by administrators who follow policy and procedures in order to effectively deliver task performance. So it's an organisational structure that's characterised by many rules, standardised processes, procedures and requirements, numbers of desks and meticulous division of labour and responsibility. And there's clear hierarchy and professional, almost impersonal interaction between the employees. Now today, bureaucracy is viewed negatively as something other than an approach to organisational design. Remember to view it objectively when critically reviewing bureaucracy as a theory, management and org behaviour. Now, Webber offers 6 characteristics of bureaucracy: hierarchical management structures, formal written communication, rigid division of labour, formal rules and regulations, and technical qualifications and competence, as well as impersonality. Now, the human relations approach arose following what is now called the Hawthorne experiments, which was made up of 4 key stages. The illumination experiments was effects of light intensity and to see whether or not that had an effect on productivity. The results were inconclusive on that one. You then had the relay assembly rooms, which was controlled changes to conditions of work, like their hours, their rests and their breaks. And the theory here was that the level of productivity increased. The interviewing program was where employees were free to discuss any aspect of their work at the beginning and the end of the shift. The outcome was positive benefits that were highlighted, and it was highlighting the need for managers to develop good listening skills. And then the back inquiring observation room, observing the informal organisation of 14 men. And it identified the development of informal subgroups and the emergence of natural leaders and social norms. We then have the McGregor X and Y theory. So McGregor was looking at the way employees are in terms of their attitude, direction, responsibility, motivation and creativity. I guess it's linked to sort of that coercion theory of getting things done, where the theory X person doesn't like work, is forced or coerced to comply, needs to be directed and avoids responsibility, motivated by fear, lack of money and job security, and has very little creativity except when getting around the rules. Whereas the theory Y person really likes work and enjoys it, directs themselves to an agreed and accepted target. They thrive on responsibility and are motivated by a desire of self-development and to contribute to the world. And they're very highly creative when given the recognition and opportunity. And then we've got the Maslow hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, again, is a motivational theory, but he believes that there is a hierarchy that starts with the most basic needs, these physiological needs for air and water and food. And you can't then address the next need, which is the safety needs, until you've addressed the ones below. The safety needs are for things like employment and resources. Then you can build on your love and belonging, friendships, and only then can you work on your self-esteem, which comes from status and recognition. And eventually you'll reach the top of your triangle, your self-actualization, which is where you have reached what you want to achieve. Let's say you want to be a doctor or a nurse, getting to the top of that triangle is where you've reached your ambition. And that top can be different for everybody, and it's about recognizing how far people want to go. Now, individuals are a central feature of an organisation's behaviour, whether they work alone or as part of a group. So the way in which individuals behave is a result of their understanding of management expectations and the influences from the team and other people in that organisation's internal environment. Their behaviour is also influenced by the organisation's external environment, including the wider societal, cultural and political environments. So from an individual perspective, the role of the manager is to balance the priorities of the individual with those in the organisation. Now, Lewin developed theories relating to group behaviour, and he proposed that group processes were subject to several influences that shaped organisational behaviour. So you've got the independence of fate, task independence, the impact of group structures as a result of different styles of leadership and individual behaviour, and identified 3 leadership models. So you have autocratic, which is where the leader doesn't consult with the group. A democratic, which is where the team is involved in decision making. And the laissez-faire, where the leaders have minimal involvement in the group making decisions. And Lewin also found that democratic leaders encourage individuals to engage in positive group behaviours, which resulted in collaborative, innovative and friendly group environments. So start to reflect on your own leadership style and the ones of your managers. Is there a predominant leadership style? Does their style ever change? And what style do other managers use in the organisation? And is their leadership style used by managers or ones favoured by an organisation as a whole? Now, Hofstede developed a model of cultural dimensions. The model offers the dimensions against which it can be possible to measure cultural differences. So you've got power distance, which from their cultural dimensions is either low or high. The low is the egalitarian versus the hierarchical. So on the low end, this is believing in or basing on a principle that all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities. You've got the uncertainty avoidance, which on the low scale is where people are open to change, but on the high scale, they prefer routines. Collectivism versus individualism, that's the we versus the I. Femininity versus the masculinity looks at whether or not you nurture your staff or whether you use power. And then the short term versus long term. Short term is very traditional, whereas the long term is more futuristic. Thank you for watching.